G'day everybody, Josh here. How you doing? It's December 31st, and just thought I'd come on and do some talking. Um, there's a party going on. Next door neighbours are Iranian, and they play some interesting music. What I wanted to talk about was I wasn't sure whether I should or whether it was useful or helpful, or probably isn't. Maybe it is. Don't know. I'll just put it into the ether and let God do the rest with it. So yeah, life is pretty awful for me at the moment. After my divorce, I don't really have a home. I'm living with my parents, which is not great. But I had a bit of a my separation kind of caused an awakening. Maybe I felt like God was saying, "Okay, now that we've put that behind us, let's move forward to the next thing." It was very unpleasant. Basically, what I realized was my whole life I've been surrounded by people who have a manipulative way of relating, and that might sound worse than I mean, or it might sound worse than it could be. There's a spectrum of manipulation. Manipulation, in my mind, is when someone doesn't say what they mean, but tries to maneuver the person into a position where they feel less powerful or less in control of themselves. So let me give you an example. If let's say I went and I got a drink, I got a glass and I was filling it up, and someone said, "What are you doing?" Well, it's clear what I'm doing. I'm getting a drink. Or let's say you turn on the air conditioner and someone says, "Why are you turning that on?" It's clear what the air conditioner does. That question is a manipulative question because it's asking a question that the person asking it doesn't actually want the answer to it. They're trying to say something else by asking that question. So what I would prefer is that someone would just say, "Can you not I don't feel hot. Can you not turn the air conditioner on?" Say something about the truth of why you're asking the question rather than why you're turning that on. Do you kind of get what I mean? I haven't really thought this through of how to explain it, but so all my life, my parents, my family, the way of relating that I learned or that I was surrounded by was manipulative. People didn't self-disclose. There was not really any honesty in communication, and that really damaged me a lot. To the point now where I find it like I listen to things people say to a degree that is way over what normal people seem to. So, sometimes it's weird. Like, for instance, someone said to me once, "You disgust me," as in I'm disgusting. And I said, "Sure, I talk about you all the time." Discuss, as in talk with someone. So, like, my mind interprets language a little bit differently than people. This is like in a split second. I don't think about this. This just happens. So someone might ask me a question, and in my mind, there's like 6 or 7 different meanings that it could be, or 3 or 4, whatever. And it's extremely frustrating. It's extremely stressful. So if I turn on the air conditioner and someone says, "Why are you turning that on?" Like, I know what the answer is. I'm turning it on because I feel uncomfortably warm. Or I might be turning it on because I think my son could use a cooler environment to feel more comfortable. Like, that's the actual answer to the question. But on the surface, I'm not being asked that question. I'm being asked a different question that I have to guess what it means. And that is really a lazy way of relating for other people to use, because it makes the person you're asking be put in a spotlight to say, to sort of make a defense for themselves. And that's no way of like building relationship. It just keeps someone on the alert all the time. I mean, one of the ways that you can help someone feel comfortable in your presence is to let them know that there's not going to be any manipulation. There's not going to be any like secret agendas and other things like that. Whereas my life growing up, everything was like secret agendas, whether the people knew about their own secret agendas or not. The rules in my house were based on moods of people. And it was pretty awful. Like, I wasn't beaten. I wasn't... Good night. I wasn't beaten or anything, but sometimes I thought, oh, gosh, if my parents were just flat out alcoholic and would beat me, maybe that would be better in a way, because at least it would be consistent and make sense. But manipulation does something to you where you're always second guessing and you're always wondering, what the real meaning is behind it and whether or not the person thinks well of you or thinks is condescending you or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, so my marriage kind of was born not really knowing myself, and trying to be as honest as I could be, and it just didn't really work. And out of it, I got my son, who is a little ball of light and joy and cheekiness and personality, whom I love and adore. And there are certain elements of his character, his personality, that I really like. He's mischievous. He can be a little bit sneaky sometimes. But he's very sweet. And I enjoy, excuse me, I enjoy seeing his curiosity. So we're homeschooling, and I'm really scared about that, because I obviously have never homeschooled a child before because I haven't had one. And I'm not going to send my son to state school or a school that we can afford because of the Australia's national curriculum and all the stuff that I found out about that, which is just basically full of manipulation. So nothing, let's say it this way, everything has hidden agendas. Everything's manipulative. Like, the reason why you're doing math is to secretly teach you to having an opinion about, say, Aboriginal people in a favourable light. Like, their scientific expertise, and, this is like alternative ways of knowing is in the literature. That's how it's described. And that, trying to elevate the status of people artificially, it's just lying. It's manipulation. It's full of manipulation, the Australian curriculum. The social emotional component of the social emotional learning, it's just manipulation. You're manipulating people's behavior, and you're trying to instill in them, or to ingrain in them, certain emotional responses that craft their behavior. And I've seen it with my nephew. He just has these axioms in his head and responds emotionally to them, and that's really not healthy. And I've found that even though can be very kind and generous, he can also be very rude and cruel. And certain elements of that have to do with how he got brought up so far. He's 10. But also, a lot of it has to do with going to school, interacting with the other kids. Like, I noticed that when I would teach Christian to say hello to people, hello, my name is Christian, can I play? And things like that. And other kids would just ignore him. And I just felt so bad for him, that he would be trying so hard to do the right thing, and no other parents seem to be teaching their kids manners and politeness. And it's awful. It's awful to see. Because what that does is that stops any relationships from forming other than the ones you already have, like your family or your siblings or the friends that your family sort of introduce into your life. I'm just seeing the building blocks and the formation of a generation of children and therefore adults who you know, who are narcissistic, self-obsessed, emotional, but have this dogmatic morality based on how other people, educators and other things, have manipulated their opinions. No reasoning skills, no logic, no sort of being able to, like, if I went to my nephew and said, he said something was sexist, and I said, well, that's not sexist, and he keeps using the word cheating on games where it's about fun, and it's like, you know, it's just awful to see that children don't behave like children. They behave like, 10-year-olds, from what I've seen so far, 10-year-olds behave like 14-year-olds used to behave. But that's not a good thing. They're not more mature. They're actually less mature because they're not able to, people are sort of included into a group because of their likes or associations rather than the fact that everybody's a child in the same sort of school. It gets like, well, what Pokemon are you? It's like, well, who cares? What if one kid doesn't play Pokemon? Does that mean he doesn't get friends? Because no one knows how to talk to another human being without using references to cultural artifacts like the game Pokemon. Like, that's really sad. And that's really isolating. And it's potentially devastating for young kids who might be poor and not have a TV, or, just have a shitty home life and their parents never sort of buy them anything or sit with them and watch anything. It's just, it's not good. So, at the moment, I've just finished my course, and I'm looking for a job. I haven't had a job in ages because I was depressed and lots of different reasons. COVID was one of them. I just walked away from my job because they were just overreaching into making me wear full PPE, and it was just awful. I hated the job. I wanted to get out for years, but I can't do anything else now. So that's why I did the course, because I wanted to jump ship and change tracks, work with kids again, but in a different capacity. I used to look after troubled kids and stuff, but now, I want to go and help Christians know God better. And, my whole life, I've never really had any friends. I don't have any now. I mean, there are people I'm friendly with. That's not true. There's a person who God has sort of brought into my life who's been a really good friend, and that's John Loeffler from Steel on Steel. He lives in America, and we catch up once a month via Zoom. And he's really refreshing and good value. But ultimately, my day, I have to go to a cafe to get people to smile at me so that I can have human interaction with another person and say, hi, how are you? And, when I'm going around in my average day, I say things to random people, which, would obviously sound weird, but I'm doing it because I'm practicing to keep up the skill of being able to talk to other people, which might sound really pathetic, but it's my reality. Like, I might be at an op shop or shopping or something, and a little kid sort of does something or says something, typical for a child, and I say, oh yeah, just make a comment or, make a joke with the person, just so I can keep practicing and not be totally isolated. I mean, I don't have a job, I don't have income. I'm living off savings from my separation, which are nearly running out, and trying to get a job and not having any references. I don't have any references. And that's awful. Like, I would be applying for multiple jobs, but I've got to explain myself and explain to them why I don't have any references, because my church got super involved in my personal life and I had to leave when we went through the separation. It was awful what they did, how they handled that. It was like it's like, the whole movement in education has, got its fingers into the church and, all other sort of institutions where everybody wants to be unhealthily involved in your life and take away your autonomy and your responsibility and either force you or manipulate you into behaving in a way that they would prefer. I don't want to be in a church that has a ministry, or the way that they minister to people is to bully them or to guilt them or to get personally involved in their marriage, separating husband and wife into two different Bible study groups and telling them not to talk to each other. I mean, this is just ridiculous. Anyone that's studied counselling knows that marriage counselling needs to be done with both parties together. It's really scary what has come about. I mean, I was going to that church for 10 years, over 10 years. And I always knew that there was these problems there, but I didn't realize, I thought they were peripheral problems. I didn't realize there was a problem in the actual ministry, like the leadership. And, I described it to someone like, I always thought I had a problem with Darth Vader, but then I realized, my minister was Senator Palpatine. Like, it felt like that. So the same things that are happening in education, or the manipulation, it's in the church as well. But it's the way people interact increasingly with each other. There's so little honesty and there's so little vulnerability. People are always seem to be looking for an angle, some advantage, some sort of power play. Like going up to someone and saying, "Why are you turning that on?" It's really unhealthy. And for someone who's trying to get healthy like me, I'm trying to learn a new way of relating to people and trying to get my life back together so that I can look after my son properly and educate him in a way that helps him to feel like he's a valuable human being that has something to offer. It's really difficult. Like sometimes I walk around and you just sort of think about your life circumstance, or I think about my life circumstances, and I just, start tearing up in the supermarket, wondering how things are going to change and where things are going to change and whether I can actually do this. Like, it's pretty sad when the thought comes into your head, is there a way that I could possibly, die and it not be devastating to my child or the people around me? No. And plus it's not what God sort of wants for someone's life. So I was like, okay, well, that's off the table. But, I'm not saying I want to kill myself. I don't want to kill myself. Don't misunderstand me. But I just don't want to play anymore. I don't want to play this game anymore. I'm so sick of the game. I'm so sick of the games. I mean, I would like to be married. I would like to be in a relationship. I'd like Christian to have an example of a loving family. But how's that ever going to happen? I mean, I just have to hope that, God will look after us. Maybe there might be a situation in the future where I can build a healthy relationship with a woman, and maybe we might be able to develop that into a marriage. But the world is so hell-bent on manipulation and lies, and like it's so strange how governments are just lying to people, like unequivocally, like literally lying to people. I mean, they always have, but they had, the illusion that there was some things that you wouldn't lie about. But now, like, everything's off the table. They lie about everything, like the manipulation with the climate change stuff. And like, it's just so blatant and awful. Like, how can we live in this world in a healthy way with so much lying and deceiving and manipulating? Lack of care for human beings. Like what happened in Israel on October 7 should have been, something that reverberated around the world. But it reverberated around the world in the opposite way that it should have. It's like, these are human beings being slaughtered in the most abusive, horrible way. And you're talking about, we've moved off that point and now we're on to the fact that, the people that are responding to that sort of horrific event, how they're conducting themselves, and the free pass is given to Hamas. It's just outrageous. Outrageous. I mean, for someone like me, who I've just said grew up in an environment where people manipulate and they don't tell the truth and they ask questions that are really trying to say something else and not really looking for the answer to the question they asked. You know, the power plays and all that other stuff. And looking around at the world, and the world has become like my family of origin, where everybody's looking for an angle, playing some agenda. You know, there's no sort of clear view of something. Everybody seems to be looking for an advantage, edge or an advantage. My phone just told me that the size limit had been reached because I always talk for too long. One of the most important things I think I discovered over the last 2 years since my separation is education, literature, like the history of ideas, like learning about history, learning about literature, learning about the Romantic period, and learning about the Bible, and reading C.S. Lewis and G.K. Chesterton, and reading books about thoughts and thinking and philosophy and all those other things, because it really stabilizes you and helps you to understand and orientate yourself about where you are, where you stand in the midst of a community or a society. It gives you back um, your sense of orientation. Helps you realize that, you know, people have an identity crisis in that they have no identity other than a group identity. They don't have an individual identity. They don't have their own individual thoughts. They don't have their own individual stuff anymore. Even though loads of people would say, "Oh, yeah, I do so." It's like, no, you don't. The biggest shock is how many people just go on autopilot and just do what everybody else is doing. I mean, there might be like a dichotomy of like, oh, I love the pandemic lockdowns. I hate the pandemic lockdowns. But the thing is that people on both sides don't seem to be thinking. They're just splitting off into groups, and there's no individual thinkers anymore. It's just like tribes and stuff. It's really sad. I don't know what the future holds. I want to get a job and start to earn a wage so that I can look after my son. I want to use the education that I've gotten up until now to be a benefit to other people. I want to stop being around manipulation and, agendas, and like, that's the hardest thing about, being in an environment where nothing's real, or it seems like nothing's real. I want to, start to form a friendship or friendships, talking to people and having that stability of helping each other to stay centered, not talking about the weather and crappy things that don't mean anything. My hope is that 2024 is going to be a year of doing for me, breaking down procrastination and breaking down insecurity and breaking down, feeling like I'm hopeless and a failure and all those other things, and stepping out and going, you know what, maybe I have been a failure, and maybe I have been a no-hoper, and maybe I have been all those things in the past, but I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to be behaving in a different way. I'm going to be living in a different way. That's my hope for this year. That's my prayer for this year, is that this year will be a year of doing and establishing a foundation for which I can live the rest of, my few decades that I have left. And it's going to be all geared towards trying to build up my son to be someone who can not only cope with the world, but engage with it and thrive in it in a way that is honoring to God and is solid. So if you guys pray for me, because I'm going to need a lot of help. For all those people who just find my channel so that they can troll a creation or a Bible video, why don't you guys do something helpful for a change? Because you guys are part of the problem. There are Christians that are like that too. It's not my theology, so it must be wrong. Like that sort of like tribal sort of attitude towards people is so bad. It is so worldly. It has nothing to do with the Spirit of God. And it is part of what's making this place a horrible place to live. Have a think about it. How can we individually change the way that we behave to make this place a more tolerable place to live for people who are hurting? I My mind goes to things that are small, like smiling at people, being polite, saying please and thank you, um, but also not tolerating bad service at cafes and things like that. Just saying, not getting angry and giving 1-star review because it took 5 minutes for you to take my order. No, engaging with people and saying, hey, I've been sitting here for a while and you guys haven't sort of taken my order. You know what I mean? Like just being more honest, and not letting stuff that is wrong sort of go by without engaging with it, but not in the way that everybody else is engaging with stuff that they don't like by dobbing people in and trying to cancel people and rubbish. But trying to build relationships with people and be relatable, trying to look at people in the eye and smile at them. You would be surprised how many people's lives have been saved from suicide just because someone took the time to look at them and smile at them. You are far more powerful than you think you are. But the reality of the effects of your behavior, whether good or evil or bad, probably won't be known till much later. So invest in good things, invest in smiles, invest in eye contact, invest in asking people if they're okay, encouraging people by calling out good behavior and praising something that someone's done that was good or quality. Being the person that builds into other people, not just looking for everybody to service you. Maybe we could practice that in 2024. The year of doing, of going out and doing things on purpose with a focus to positive building and relations. See you later. Happy New Year.